68 अक्षर ये ना जानो, 68 तीर्थ सार, 8 संपदा थी परमाणु, 68 दातार, समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार, ये छे 14 पुरवनो सार, समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार, ये छे 14 पुरवनो सार। नवपद एना नवनिध आपे, भव भवना दुख कापे, वीर वचन थी हृदय व्यापे, परमतम पद आपे, समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार, ये छे 14 पुरवनो सार, समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार, ये छे 14 पुरवनो सार। एना महिमानो नहीं पार, एनो अर्थ अनंत अपार, एना महिमानो नहीं पार, एनो अर्थ अनंत अपार, समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार, ये छे 14 पुरवनो सार, समरो मंत्र भलो नवकार, ये छे 14 पुरवनो सार।
Pranam, Jai Jinendra. Welcome back. You had two very interesting lessons in the last. I think I missed about 3 lessons. So we'll resume our current topic of Nav Tatva today. Let's start with the prayers and then carry on with the subject. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabbasahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabbapavapanasano, Mangalanancha Sabvesim Padmam Havai Mangalam, Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabbasahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabbapavapanasano, Mangalanancha Sabvesim Padmam Havai Mangalam, Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabbasahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabbapavapanasano, Mangalanancha Sabvesim Padmam Havai Mangalam. Veera Sarvasura Surendra Mahito Virambida Sansrita Virena Bhiyata Swakarmanichayo Viraya Nityam Nama Veera Tirthamidam Prauthamatulam Veerashighoram Tapo Veere Sri Druti Kirti Kanti Nichaya Sri Veerabhadram Disa अंगूठे अमृतवसे लप्तितणा भंडार श्री गुरु गौतम समरिये मनवांछित फलदातार. Before I start sharing my slide, I'll just outline what I'm hoping to cover today. A lot of it is a recap of what we've done, but I'm going to introduce the subject of Ajiv Tattva today. We've spent quite a few weeks on Jiv Tattva and we haven't really finished with it. Because ultimately, the knowledge or the study of Nav Tatva is all about understanding ourselves, that is Jeev, and our relationship with the world outside, with the aim of coming back to ourselves and being more and more aware of our true self, ultimately to the point of us being completely engrossed in ourselves. And the whole purpose of studying Nav Tatva is to digest this, because the ultimate aim of dharma is to take us back to ourselves. And within, if you explore the writings of all the Astic religions, the core matter is that if you know yourself, then you know everything. So ultimately, knowledge is about knowing oneself. So we will recap what we have talked about in very briefly about Jeev Tattva, and then introduce the topic of Ajiv Tattva. But throughout the course of this particular series of lectures for this topic, we will be coming back to the core of what we are trying to understand. And what I'd like to spend more time on today as well is to explore further exactly where we are deviating from the true path of knowing ourselves, and what sort of confusion and what sort of wrong beliefs actually keeps us in sansar, going from one life to another. So we'll spend a bit more time in understanding that as well. And I know we have covered some of it, but I'd just like to explore that a bit more, because ultimately that is the heart of spiritual knowledge or Adhyatmic Samaj. So let me share my slides. So Tattva, Tat means that, the universe and ourselves, and Tva refers to its nature or its root. So understanding Tattva means understanding who we are and what is our place in the universe and what the universe is. The nine tattvas, as we've understood many times, is Jeev, Ajeev, Punya, Pap, Ashrav, Samvar, Nijara, Bandh, and Moksha. And we are familiar with this diagram, which represents the nine tattva with the metaphor of a man trying to cross the ocean in a boat, and what the various tattvas actually mean in relationship to this journey of the soul from a life of birth and death, to the ultimate existence of the soul in its complete freedom, without any attachment and in total bliss, from where there is no birth and therefore no death. And that place is moksha. So the Nav Tattva is also an understanding of that journey of the soul and what are the various factors that assist that journey and what are the various factors that actually make that journey difficult and make that journey never ending for some of us. And as we've learned, that journey so far, if you are looking at the past, has been ongoing for an infinity. And it is possible that the future of our soul's journey, of ourselves towards moksha, is also an extremely long time and could be infinity. But if we make use of the facilities and the faculties that we have inherited in this particular life and make this particular understanding and knowledge of ourselves deep rooted, then we are laying the foundation for shortening our future journey to the ultimate goal. So, in fact, in the attempt to shorten that journey, we would actually paving the path for future happiness and the ultimate happiness. And all this is about Jeev, meaning life, meaning all souls. And as we have seen, the soul is that which experiences, which has the faculty of life, as opposed to everything else in the universe, which does not actually have its own ability to understand anything. So, a piece of dead wood has no awareness of what it is. A tree, which is alive, is aware of what it is because the tree has a soul. When part of the tree is cut off or the tree is felled and the tree then dies, as we call it, that means the soul has left the tree, then the life that was what we call the tree, once it has departed, that wood has no awareness of its existence. So ultimately, Jeev is the only element which has awareness of itself. Jivati prana dharyatit jiva. That which has the attributes of prana is Jeev. Gnan, darshan, charitra, tap, virya, and upyog. These are the virtues or the qualities of the soul. And ultimately, the basic virtue or quality is upyog. When it is applied to having a general awareness of things, then it is called darshan upyog. When it is applied to a more detailed understanding of a particular area of knowledge, then it's called Gnanopyog. Similarly, we got Tap, Virya. So the basic quality of the soul is Upyog, meaning awareness. Then we talked about the 10 prans, 5 senses, 3 bulls, Man bal, Vachan bal, Kai bal, Swasoswas, and Ayushya. And then we also talked about Paryapti, Ahar, Sarir, Indriya, Swasoswas, Bhasha, and Man. And we've sent you PDF of this tables, which will be useful, though they are in Gujarati. I'm hoping that you're finding them useful. They are just summaries of what we've discussed. Now, we also talked about the other divisions when we start learning Nav Tatva. And the way the Shastras describe it is the elements, those that are worth knowing. So that is everything, Jeev and Ajeev, and that includes everything in the universe. Out of those, understanding and being clear about what are the elements that are harmful to the soul, therefore, those elements which should not be indulged in. So, hey, necessary to abandon or discard. Those are pap, ashrav, and bandh. And upadey, meaning those that are important to embrace and accept, are punya, samvar, nirjara, and moksha, because all those elements are beneficial in the development of the soul and ultimately to take us to the ultimate goal of moksha. However, the corollary that we discussed here was that punya is also a form of ashrav, and ultimately punya is a vehicle. Once you reach your destination or you are near your destination, then you got to abandon the vehicle as well. So punya is that which gives us the facility to progress spiritually, but ultimately that in itself should never be the ultimate goal, because that also has the potential for pulling the soul back into sansar unless the punya is created with the right conduct to ensure that the ultimate goal is always clear. So, if we do a lot of good with the either expressed or unexpressed, meaning something that is latent, desire for more pleasure of the senses, for more wealth, for more recognition, and we do good to actually acquire all those things that are not of the soul, those that are outside, and those that are of no use to the soul ultimately, then we will form punya because we are doing good. But that punya will give us those things that we desire, but ultimately they will pull the soul down and get it back into its cycle of life and death, of sansar, because ultimately the soul has not understood its true nature and identifies itself with all those other things that it considers desirable. So ultimately, for that reason, punya is also something to be discarded as we go along. So under Jeev, we got Jeev, Samvar, Nirjara, and Moksha. And if you notice here, in this two titles, so all the elements that are included, punya is excluded from Jeev. And punya is, along with pap, included in Ajeev because of this explanation that I've just given you, that it is ultimately to be discarded. Punya is ultimately to be discarded, as obviously is pap. So Ajeev, which is clear, punya, pap, ashrav and bandh, they all need to be discarded. So this is also one other way of dividing the 9 tattvas between the two main ones, principal ones, Jeev and Ajeev. So we've just looked at the names of the 9 tattvas. What out of those are for us to know? That is Gne, He, to stay away from, and Upade, to incorporate in life. And we discussed the other aspects of the 9 tattvas. And we will move on to understanding Ajeev Tattva later today, so in a few minutes. Now, let's review our understanding of why we are studying this in a bit more depth. Can I maybe stop sharing for a minute and maybe persuade some of you to switch on your videos if you can? And let's try and recap our own understanding. This is a subject that we keep on going back to, but if you listen to spiritual discourses from great Mahatmas, of our great Guru Bhagwans, of Acharya Bhagwans and Panyas Ji Maharaj or Sadhu Bhagwans, or sit down and talk with Sadhuji Bhagwans or Guru Maharaj, the ultimate subject matter always turns back to this: who we are and where are we going wrong, and how do we get back on the right path. And ultimately, that is the essence of Nav Tatva. So let's go a bit deeper into understanding and I will just give a simple example. It's something that I think I've discussed in the other class last week on Wednesday. But there is another story that I've come across which Param Pujya Panyas Labdhi Vallabh Vijayji in a recent pravachan in Grant Road in Mumbai just a few days ago has actually explored a wonderful story which is quite useful. So let me recite this story and then pose a question so that we come back to this particular point that I'm trying to make here. So the story goes like this, and this story had a lot of relevance to me, partly because of where it was being recited in a pravachan in the area where I lived during my first year as a college student in Mumbai, Grant Road, and looking at the career path that I was taking. So it had a lot of relevance to me, but the way it goes was like this. And he's basically trying to explore and make the audience aware of where we are going wrong. So he says there was once a very successful and quite a proud doctor who was very aware of his status in society and moved about with a lot of pride. And once on his way to work, on to his surgery or between patients, He's rushing through the streets and comes across a narrow lane. And I mean, I'm not doing justice to the way I'm saying this story. Pujapanyas Labdhi Vallabhji is saying it extremely well in Gujarati, but I'll do my best. And my thanks to him and his teaching that I'm able to recite this and share this with you all. So the doctor is rushing and comes across a narrow street. It's very narrow and it does not allow more than one person to pass. And as he is rushing there, he doesn't see that there is another Mahatma or sannyasi who has entered the street as well. And he rushes on. And he bumps into this sannyasi because the street is very narrow. And the sannyasi gently looks at him. There is no accusation or there is no any kind of animosity, but he gently asks him, "Who are you?" So he says, "I am a doctor." And that is how he introduced himself. Obviously, with the idea that that is something that should impress this sannyasi. And he's got his usual garb of he's very well booted and suited, and he looks very smart, and he's got an important looking bag in his hands. And he haughtily says that I am a doctor. And the sannyasi looks at him and starts laughing very loudly. So this puzzles the doctor and says, and then he's looking at him. And he may have also felt that maybe the sannyasi is insulting him. And he goes on the defensive and he says, "Yes, I am a doctor. If you can ask anybody there. You can go to my office there, which describes all my degrees and all my titles. They're all there. And I am a fully qualified doctor, and this is who I am, and I live here and work here." So the sannyasi, after a bit of effort, stops laughing and gently asks him, "Before you were a doctor, who were you?" So the doctor says, "I was a medical student in this particular college." You say, "Before you were a medical student, who were you?" "Well, I was in ordinary college, and before that, I was in school. Before that, I was young. I was in nursery. Before that," and says, "I was a young baby." And says, "Before that," and says, "Well, before that, I was in my mother's womb. And before that," and then he gets stumped. He says, "I don't know who I was before that." So he says, "You are who you were before all this journey started. So who are you exactly?" And that is the question that we all need to ask ourselves. We identify ourselves with all these positions that we have, but ultimately, these are all temporary constructs. Because a few years later, the doctor might retire and may not no longer be able to call himself a practicing doctor. And if rules in different countries are applied, then he may not have, if he cancels his registration, then he may have no legal right to see a patient and advise as a doctor. And at that time, he would have to say, "I was a doctor, I'm no longer practicing."
I think meeting na. Meeting na lay jam, આવું છું જા. તને ક્યાં હું કહું છું બધું કામ?
Sorry, somebody. Okay, all right, solve. That's fine. So the crucial question is, if Nav Tatva, if the knowledge of Nav Tatva is to recognize who we are in our daily life and in our constant existence, in everything that we do and everything that we think, everything that we speak, are we aware of who we are? Like this proud doctor is only thinking of his particular status or position and his existence as a doctor. So he actually introduces himself as such. But what do we identify ourselves with? What do we associate ourselves with? And how connected do we feel with all those other things? Is there any time during the day or maybe even ever in our lives that we have identified ourselves separately from all those other constructs that we have? So all our personalities, all our relationships, and all the things that we possess. So our identification is with things that we possess. So we would say, this is my house, this is my car, this is my bank balance, these are my clothes. And we sit down at a meal and I filled up our plate and we immediately begin to possess that plate of food and say, this is my food. And we are protective of that. We would find it a bit difficult to share it. If somebody says, I'm very hungry, I'm more hungry than you, can I have your plate of food? Some of us sometimes may be generous enough to not think twice about doing that and sharing completely. But if we are just as hungry or have no access to another meal just at that time, then we may struggle a bit, though reason may prevail, and seeing the other person in front of us, we may decide that he is in more need than I am, and here, share that plate with him or give it to him, or not feel generous enough and say, okay, I'll share half of it with you. So our possessiveness of the things and everything that is around us that you accumulated is what we identify with ourselves with. We identify ourselves with our people that we come in contact with. And we identify ourselves with our positions in life. Now, the crucial question is that are any of these identities and what we identify with part of us? That's a question.
Sorry, Ajitbhai, can you repeat the question, please?
Okay. So all the things that we identify ourselves with, all the people that we identify ourselves with, and all our personalities. And Param Pujya Panyas Mukti Labdhi Vallabh Vijayji very nicely put these three things together in one of his other lectures that I was listening to, one of his other pravachans that I was listening to. He says in Gujarati, there's a Vastu, Vyakti, and Vyaktitva. Vastu means things, Vyakti means people, and Vyaktitva is our personalities. And our total identification in our daily lives is with these three things. So the question is, can we separate ourselves from all these three things that we identify ourselves with, and can we actually accept that none of these three things are actually part of us? They are all temporary constructs. They are all not of us. So all the things are made of, they are things. They're not life. So we as life has no connection with that which is dead or which is non-life. So Jeev has no connection with all that which is a Jeev. Because ultimately, Jeev in its free state is completely free, completely independent, does not depend on anything, and does not need anything else for its existence, because it is completely independent, and all that it actually desires and its completeness in its bliss, in its knowledge, in its total happiness is completely independent. It does not require a bank balance to feel happy. It does not require friends and family to feel happy. It does not require a title to feel happy. Because none of those things, titles, people, are part of him. They are all temporary constructs for this life. All these elements will change in the next life. And they've been changing for infinite time in the past. And every life in the future will have temporary connections. But every time within that life, every time we identify ourselves so completely with everything else that we totally forget who we are. And that Dharma says is the fundamental fault that has ensured that we don't get out of this. Is this making sense?
Yes, after grasping what you said, yes, we have to believe in ourselves that our soul is different. It is not our.
Our
After
soul is,
grasping all this, after learning all this, yes, we have to accept that this is all uh, joining us for this life, not for next life.
yeah. So, Sudeep, you raised a very important point. At one level, intellectually, logically, accepting this, after a certain level of education and repetition, we begin to get to accept it. But then getting to the stage of actually feeling it, feeling the separateness of the soul from everything else, and not identifying ourselves with those other things, that is where the real spiritual development of the soul starts. And when would we recognize that we have actually come to a state like that?
I think meditation will make us understand more.
But what would you feel? So if we were to separate ourselves from all these other things, what do you think we would actually experience? So we are ultimately talking about experience. This separateness is something that ultimately becomes real and becomes live when it is experienced. And that is spiritually the biggest step for the soul that helps it set itself on the course towards its liberation. And that experience is something that comes with effort. So one has to keep on trying, and the effort is internal. The effort is trying to explore constantly this particular question. And the fundamental question is, who am I? And it is not a difficult question. And I recently discovered that that is a subject matter that you can actually discuss with an 8-year-old child, which I've just done a couple of weeks ago. And people begin to grasp that. Not only that, I'm sure it can be something that can be discussed with a younger child. And at any age in life, one can discuss that and begin to understand that. So what is it that we would experience? Any suggestions or any exploration of this? Sheila and Sudhir Bhai, you've been in the other classes and we will discuss some of this at depth. And
Yes.
Bharat Bhai is probably around as well, and maybe we can get into that. But no, Bharat Bhai is not here today.
Mm.
But we got Hasmukh Bhai. We don't have Nick today. But let me ask you the question differently. How many of you can say that you have felt very happy, blissful, and at peace today? Or any time in the last 1 week, 1 month, and such was an experience that you actually remember that?
Maybe just now, after listening to you again, has grasped my mind. I mean, you can feel the freedom inside slowly. It will take time to feel the freedom inside. That we can't take everything for grasp. I mean, we can't take everything for granted. So,
Okay.
freedom, I would say the word.
Freedom, yes, that's a very good word.
Ajitbhai, so would you feel unattached to things?
Yes, but I'm looking for a deeper understanding. If you look at, so you feel unattached.
Yeah.
If you explore our state of our being, then ultimately we are all seeking. Somebody's got background noise. Can maybe, if you are, maybe switch off your mic until you are speaking, maybe, I don't know. So what we are trying to understand is that freedom, that feeling of being unattached, should expose what within the soul? What does freedom feel like? Any other words? And don't worry, if you're finding it difficult to find the words in English, you can use Gujarati, Hindi, whatever language you like.
Yesterday, I went to Ekta Center for Samaik.
Yeah.
And there, whilst Jayeshbhai was explaining about Jeev, which were to be killed yesterday, the Eid. Yeah. And there, it just suddenly, tears began to roll down the just listening to him, and it took me right out of that center into, I couldn't understand or explain, but the mind was completely blank, but I could hear Jayeshbhai, and it was a completely different experience. As to you, it's hard to say, but really you could understand him and understand the other jeev as such, which were to be killed.
Wonderful. So,
And
Ben,
yeah,
yep, you actually brought in another element that we have, to an extent, I think, discussed in the other class.
yeah,
But that identification with other life and realizing that our relationship and our connection with the rest of the jeeves within the universe, meaning all life,
all life, yeah,
is the only thing that is of us. So when we get to that state of being free, unattached to everything that is not of ourselves, then the understanding of our kinship with the rest of life in the universe, so those tears in the identification of yourself with those goats which were going to be killed
yeah,
on that particular day, yesterday, and you're feeling compassion for them. So ultimately, the feeling of compassion for all life, the understanding of all life in its various stages, and the identification with everything within the universe that is connected to you directly, not, and which is completely similar to you, but not dissimilar. So everything else that we identify ourselves with, and the biggest culprit is our body.
body,
So we find it very difficult to separate ourselves from our body. And that the term is called dehadhyas, the awareness of our body. And then when one gets to that stage, when one becomes aware that we are separate from the body and everything else, the feeling of bliss, the feeling of freedom, the feeling of happiness is the experience that one would actually understand. And when I asked, if you look back at any time in the past when you felt so free and so full of joy, and we are not talking about being excited, we are not talking about joy in terms of jumping about, something which is completely calm, one realizes that that state has no basis in any acquisition, has no basis in any recognition, has no basis in any achievement. And it is actually the absence of any achievement, any acquisition, any association that actually brings about that joy.
joy.
So it is our separateness from everything else that we associate ourselves with. So our dissociation, our separateness, our detachment from that, that is the path that we want to take. And if you ask somebody who is taking Diksha and look at what they are actually feeling, then when we see videos or pictures of them dancing with that ogo, that is actually a real feeling. That I'm so happy that I have abandoned everything else and entered this life of complete freedom. So a sadhu Bhagwant or a sadhviji Bhagwant who does not have anything to call their own, they even abandon their name. I will no longer be called by that particular name. All my family members were my family members. I am now separate from them. I'm part of a group which is seeking its own self. And that freedom is the core of this happiness. So ultimately, knowledge of Nav Tatva is to explore all those things. And I just wanted to emphasize this before we get into the next element of Ajiva Tattva. So let me share this slide, and I'm going to just leave all this with you to mull over, because
Ajitbhai, may I say something, please?
yes, certainly.
Before we go into the new topic.
Yeah.
I'm just very conscious. At the last time, I think Sandeep had a question which you left it pending till the next class, which is today.
Yeah.
I'm really interested what he had that he was asking.
Okay. Sandeep, do you want to? You're talking about Sandeep, yeah? Do you want to?
I think you made a note of it or something. You said you were going to carry that forward at the start of the next class or something.
Yeah.
Because the time was up or whatever with the last class.
I remember. Thank you for reminding me, Asmupai. But do you remember the question, Sandeep?
No, you didn't tell us the question. I think if Sandeep is there, he
Sandeep
could
had,
ask.
yes, Sandeep had sent me a question on the
On the chat or
on
something,
the
maybe?
chat. Yes, yes. Sandeep, do you remember?
Wasn't related to this the topic we were talking about, but it was related to something I was just thinking about.
Yeah.
Because the next Tirthankar is going to be King Shreni. Well,
Yeah.
he's going to be the next Tirthankar, and because he went into he in his last birth, in his last life, he ended up in hell.
So he is
I was
currently
just thinking, how did he get the Tirthankar Nam karma? Him and also Vasudev Krishna. I was just curious as to when they achieved that.
Yeah. So in terms of the, so it's a good question, Sandeep. So Hasmukh, by just exploring that, so it's not related to this, but it's an important question, that the soul's spiritual progress can start at any stage within a certain lifespan before you get to the point where you have actually got to that awareness of yourself as the soul and have progressed spiritually and have identified yourself and followed the right path, the right dev, the right guru. Before that, if you have acquired your ayushya for the next life in a state of ignorance, in a state where you have not actually been exercising any awareness or any such knowledge, then in that state, you will acquire a karma for your next life. So Ayushya karma within a certain life is only formed once during the lifetime. All the other 7 karmas are constantly being formed, attached, bound to the soul. So all that process is constantly going on for the 7 other karmas, but Ayushya karma is only formed once during the lifetime for the next life. And generally our Shastras say that that happens when 2/3 of your current life has gone and 1/3 is remaining. It may not necessarily happen at that point, but if it doesn't happen then it can happen in the last remaining 1/3 when 2/3 of that 1/3 has gone, and so on. And ultimately, it may not happen, it may not have happened at any time, but it will definitely happen at the point of death, because then that determines where you go in your next life. And that is something that that is why it is important how we die. So Samadhi Marana is something that we all wish for. So in terms of King Shrenik, before he actually met Bhagwan Mahavir and before he understood what dharma was, he was actually a very prominent, a very able king, but he was also, like a lot of kings in that time, had the was particularly interested in the sport of hunting, and he used to go out with his men into the jungle, into the forest to hunt animals. And once in one of such trips, he actually comes across a pregnant doe, a female deer,
Yeah.
who he sees from a distance and aims his bow and arrow and releases the arrow, which kills the doe. He doesn't know that she's pregnant, but from a distance he identifies her and then kills her. And then when he and his men go near the doe and recognize that she was pregnant and there is a baby inside, and he's actually, the arrow has entered the mother and the fetus and killed them both. And because he was a keen hunter and was very proud of his particular skill with the bow and arrow, he is very proud of this moment that I have actually killed 2 lives with 1 arrow. And he starts boasting about it. It is at that point that he acquired the Ayushya of his next life, and that particular gloating over a heinous, a violent act, a violent deed, earned him the life in Narak.
Yes. So did he get the Tirthankar Nam Karma after that?
Afterwards, yeah, obviously.
So I was just thinking that, like Mahavir Bhagwan, when he was a Vasudev, he ended up in Narak
Yeah,
after that.
all Vasudevs do. All
Yeah.
Vasudevs,
So basically, but then after that life, he got Tirthankar Nam Karma in the 24th or 25th life.
So Tirthankar Nam Karma is firmed up. The term that is used is that Tirthankar Nam Karma Nikachit Karu, meaning then that at that point it is completely firmed up and guaranteed to actually it is guaranteed to give you the fruits of that. So, and that usually happens in the 3rd life before the life of the Tirthankar.
Right. So basically, what I was thinking was that at the moment we got a list of next Tirthankars, 24 Tirthankars as well.
Yeah.
Is that list got from a Kevli?
Yes, yes. So it's part of the Shastra. So at this time we know who the 24 Tirthankars were in the previous.
Yeah.
You see, current ones, obviously, and the future one. So
Yeah.
knowledge of all three choices, who the Tirthankars
Yes.
are, is known. Yeah.
Yes, but what I was thinking was, Vasudev Krishna ended up in hell. So after that, we don't know anything about his life. Because we know that he's going to be the 12th
Yeah.
Tirthankar in the next life,
Yeah.
in the next Chovisi.
Yeah.
So I didn't know when he formed his Tirthankar Nam Karma, or is he yet to form?
So I'm not sure of that, but it's so similarly we got the story of Ravan, the Prativasudev, and it is quite clearly mentioned that he formed his Tirthankar Nam Karma when he was engaged in playing the veena while his wife Mandodari was dancing in Ashtapad. About Krishna, I don't know when that happened, but or if it has happened. So if we go further along, then there are the 24th Tirthankar in the next Chovisi, whose life will be similar to that of Bhagwan Rishabdev.
Right.
In our Chovisi. Again, there may be details available somewhere, but
because I wasn't sure whether that list was formed by the Kevli Bhagwant, or
it would be,
or whether they have already formed these nam karmas, and it's a list formulated from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, even if the Tirthankar Nam Karma has yet to be formed up, so if there are many more lives, so
Right.
for example, in the future, Bhagwan Rishabdev told Bharat Chakravarti that your son Marichi. So the question that Bharat Chakravarti asked Bhagwan Rishabdev, that in this time in Bharat Kshetra at the moment, is there any other soul that is going to be a Tirthankar in the future?
Yes.
So Bhagwan Rishabdev's answer was that your son Marichi is going to be the 24th Tirthankar in this particular Chovisi, in this time cycle. Not only that, he is going to be the first Vasudev called Triprushta Vasudev, and he's also going to be a Chakravarti. And then Bharat Chakravarti goes to Marichi, bows down to him, goes round him 3 times, and says to him that I am bowing down to you, not in your current dress, because by this time he had become a Tridandi, but in celebration of because you are going to be the future Tirthankar, and this is what Bhagwan Rishabdev has told me. So by that time, his Tirthankar Nam Karma had not been formed up.
Right, okay.
So a Kevli Bhagwant, a Tirthankar Paramatma would know, and it's not only just in this life. If somebody went along and said, can we identify who the souls are around in this Bharat Kshetra or in any other Kshetra, or currently residing in Narak or in Devlok, who are going to be Tirthankars in the future, then that knowledge would be available, even though they may not have formed up their Tirthankar Nam Karma.
Yes, but I was just thinking about something else, which is slightly confusing, but like Kevli Bhagwant knows what's happening in past and future and everything.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, if they know the future, everything in the future was happening, that would mean, I suppose, that it is a firm that's going to happen. So
true, but
but
but none of it actually happens with the required effort, Sandeep.
Yes.
So in spite of a Kevli Bhagwant knowing, the process of actually getting to that stage is dependent on a lot of other things. those circumstances will happen, but in addition to those, all the other circumstances, effort is a major circumstance. Purusharth
Yes, but
is what makes things happen.
that's that. Yes, I understand that, but that's the way the process is going to happen, and you know is but the eventual result
Mhm.
is already known from before, like
To a Tirthankar Paramatma, to a Kevali Paramatma,
yes,
but not to us.
yes.
So our efforts should be directed at not worrying about that, but to
No, I'm just thinking that basically it's all pre predestined basically, but the way it happens is different, obviously, from your efforts and all that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Ajitbhai, I just want to, well, thank you, Sandeep, for that question, because it actually illustrates a lot of other things as well. Because like about karma bands, that the formation of karmas is constant, attaching to the soul. It happens all the time, and this Ayushya karma, I think they said you said 2/3 of the life. I also saw somewhere that it's quite likely to happen on the Tithi days.
Yes.
That's why on the
Right,
Tithi
right.
days we have to be extra careful.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't mention that just to keep it brief, but yes, all the tithis, Bij, Pacham, Atham, Agyaras, and Chodas are important days. That is why our Dharma teaches us to be extra careful and do more penance on those days.
And although the Ayushya karma can be formed any time, but where we go into next life is determined by the way we die, I think. What's in our mind at the time of death.
Yeah, so the Ayushya karma, if it is not formed at any time before, then the manner of death at the point of death, that will definitely be formed at that time. So
Yep. But what I'm saying is, like with Sri Raja's from that illustration, I take that like his Tirthankar Nam Karma was during his lifetime sometime,
yes,
but he went to Narak because maybe at the point of when he was actually dying, there was something, he had a wretched thoughts or something was going through his mind that sent him to Narak, because it's the way he died, maybe.
no, his Ayushya karma for the next life was determined before that. So it was
Oh,
completely,
when he killed the dove.
yes. So
Yeah.
at that time, that was destined and that was to happen no matter what
No
his,
matter what. But
yeah,
so after that, he lived uh, such a better life that
yeah,
he got the Tirthankar Nam. Okay,
yeah,
I
yeah.
understand that.
And yeah, gone.
Just one thing. The other thing is, like you mentioned earlier about freedom, feeling freedom and light and all that, knowing all those things. For me personally, it's quite a worry learning all these things that we've learned about Jeev and all that, because it's so important. It's really fundamental
Yep.
to the religion. Now, for instance, like I think Bakri,
Yeah.
this Bakri thing come up, and it's such a hype, like because Jainism tells us that all the Jiv, in no matter in whatever sense, they're all the same.
Yeah.
So it could be a human being or an ant or a microorganism, they all have equality. So for instance, like when we eat vasi food, we eat food from outside and all that.
Yeah.
We're already eating living beings already.
Yeah. So the amount of hinsa in our lives is enormous. There's no doubt about that. And if we were to sort of become very strict with everything that we do, then there are a lot more restrictions that we would need to start applying in our lives. And that is why when we get to that stage when we are willing to actually do that, then people become much more strict in everything that they do. But we may get to a state of awareness without necessarily becoming active in applying everything. So, and that may, so for example, if we understand and feel that, but for some reason we do not get to the point of actually applying and acting and living by those uh, by those principles, that still does not mean that our progress uh, will never start. So the basic requirement of the progress is to get to this stage of awareness of our true self. And once that starts, then slowly the action, so charitra, will follow. So darshan and gnan, and then ultimately charitra, putting all this knowledge into practice, will follow at some stage. And if we are able to, then applying it and actually living by everything that we are learning, that is the best way. But a lot of us probably find it very difficult and may make excuses or may not be ready yet. However,
I feel that, once we get the fundamentals, once we get it and we really understand it, then
yeah,
by default, we will kind of question it each time because we've
yeah,
understood the fundamentals.
yeah,
And I've also learned that, like, I don't, this, it's very, I don't know why we're not taught of these fundamentals at the beginning, at the start, because I heard that Mahavir Bhagwan's Deshna was on Nav Tatva. The whole his Deshna was on Nav Tatva. Like, and once we understand Jiv, and all that, and then we obviously understand karma bandh and the formation of karmas and all that.
yeah,
What I would like is I still want to try and understand the atoms and the cosmology.
yeah,
That will make it clear. But once you understand it, then it actually tells you how vital it is and how we can save ourselves.
absolutely. And thank you for bringing us back to the fundamentals. And that's what I try to emphasize. However, for a lot of us, it can be a difficult journey to even enter that space. And therefore, it is sometimes quite easy and interesting to start off with stories, to start off with certain things, and then prepare the mind to get into a deeper state. So I'm glad we are here. Let me just share my final slide, uh, which opens up the topic for next class. And maybe we'll discuss some of this on the next Saturday. Okay, so okay. So the final slide today, so there is basically introducing the subject of a Jeev. 5 elements there. And I just want to make you familiar with just a couple of things before we end today's class. And there's a term called Astikai. Asti is Pradesh and Ekai means Samuha, meaning Pradeshano Samuha, at least that which is formed of different parts, but that element is an Astikai. So there are 5 elements that come under the classification Ajiv. There is Dharmastikai, Adharmastikai, Akashastikai, Pudgalastikai, and Kal. Kal is not given the name of Astikai because it is one single unit. Dharmastikai is the element that allows bodies to move within space. So Dharmastikai and Adharmastikai. Adharmastikai is the element which allows moving bodies to stay still and rest in a place. These two elements are spread throughout the universe, and these elements are not actually matter. They are Dharmastikai, Adharmastikai, and they are within space, which is Akashastikai. Akashastikai is divided into two parts. One part is called Lok Akash, that is within the confines of the universe within which bodies can move or stay still. And Alok Akash, where neither Dharmastikai or Adharmastikai exists, and therefore bodies do not move outside the Lok Akash, because there is no element that will allow movement or any element that would allow a body to stay still. Therefore, there is complete nothingness in the Alok Akash. And everything that we see, everything that we experience is within Lok Akash. Therefore, when the soul achieves nirvana and it leaves its last body and goes to moksha, it goes straight up and ends up at the end of the universe above Siddhshila, where it then stays permanently, and it can't move beyond that because the natural tendency of the soul is to go straight up, and when it cannot in its free state, so it cannot move beyond that because there is no Dharmastikai or Dharmastikai. And then we got Pudgalastikai. Pudgal is all the matter, energy, etc., and we'll come into greater detail of that. The word basically means Puran and Gal, that which comes together and that which separates. So if you look at everything that we identify as things, then you join things, they form something, you separate them. So say, if you are looking at an element and you divide it into molecules and then atoms and then subatomic particles and so on and on. The smallest indivisible particle, as Jainism describes, it's called of matter, is called Param Anu, which is the totally final indivisible fundamental particle. And I mean, there was a time when science said that atom is the fundamental particle. Then it discovered protons, neutrons, electrons. Then it said that those are the ultimate particles. And then we were now discovered a lot of subatomic particles. And Jain Dharma basically says that the smallest indivisible particle, that is what a Kevali Bhagwant in his Gnan can identify, that is the smallest indivisible particle called Parmanu, which is something that is beyond any kind of measurement or any kind of visibility from any kind of instrument that you can devise. And then the final element is Kal, which is time, which is just one unit as it flows. And these are the elements that we'll start discussing in the next topic, Ajiv, but we'll be coming back to Jiv as we go along. Any final question before we finish today?
Ajitbhai, I've not had a question, but I've received a request asking if we can have a PDF of the slides.
Okay. All right. What I'll do is I'll send it to Sandeep Bhai, this particular And I think this probably more or less includes, I'll make sure that I've corrected the spelling mistakes and then I'll send them to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. There's a lot of literature available on the internet and there are lots of articles that are available in English on this particular topic. Okay. Any other requests? I understand that about 20 people from this class have signed up for next Saturday's in-person event at Ostwald Center from 10 o'clock. I hope I'll be seeing some of you. It'll be nice to actually recognize some of you. I only know you by names. Okay. So looking forward to seeing some of you next week. You all received the details of what that day is going to look like. And Pushpa Ben and her team have will be making arrangements for a nice lunch for us as well. And hopefully you'll all have an interesting day. Okay.
Can I just add, just please make sure you bring pen and paper and also a water bottle. I know Ajitbhai's put it on the message, but just as a reminder.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all. If I've said anything which is wrong, which is against the teachings of our Tirthankar Paramatmas, our Guru Bhagwans and our Dharma, I ask for forgiveness. Chinagna virudh kaipon bolyo ho, te savihu manochan kaya kari, tas michhami dukadam, Sauramangalamangalyam, Surakalyan Karanam, Pradhanam Suradharmanam, Jainam Jayati Sasanam. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Ajitbhai. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being interactive and participating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ajitbhai.
Thank you.
Meera.
Thank you. And Sheila Ben, hold on to your experience because that's very valuable.
Thank you.